Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about the film Roar from 1981. Roar is one of those films that you talk more about how it was made than the film itself, but I still think the film itself is an interesting, intriguing mesh of a lot of different styles that should never have happened, almost like the making of the film itself. The main reason I'm talking about this film is Drafthouse is going to be re-releasing this towards the end of April. The reason this film happened is Tippi Hedren and her husband slash manager at the time, Noel Marshall, she starred in a film that shot in Africa, and she went to a kind of wildlife preserve or a hunting preserve or something, and they saw all these lions who were living in the house of an abandoned game master's house, and they liked that idea, and they wanted to kind of show how a lot of this wildlife was being killed off, to show how it was preserved and to help a lot of these endangered species, but then realized they wanted to make a film with a lot of lions and tigers and cheetahs and panthers and elephants and things, but with these big cats they really have to be raised together, otherwise there'll be a lot of territorial issues. So they decided to live with a lot of these bigger cats in their house in Beverly Hills. Marshall had two sons from a previous relationship, and Tippi Hedren had her daughter Melanie Griffith, yes, that Melanie Griffith, and they all lived there with their cats as they grew up with them, and eventually they had to leave Beverly Hills because a couple of the large cats got out on occasion. So they moved and they started this preserve, but they also started filming, and it looks like it was filmed in Africa, but it was actually made in Los Angeles, which I think the set design might be one of the most accomplished things about it, that they made that look so much like Africa. Half the time I was like, did they do pickup shots there? I just assumed they filmed something there, but they really didn't. They shot it all in California. Working with large animals can be incredibly dangerous. In fact, no animals were harmed during the making of this film, but over 70 cast and crew injuries were reported, including Melanie Griffith having to have facial reconstructive surgery, Tippi Hedren getting crushed by an elephant and she broke her leg, then being walked on later by a large amount of large cats, I think like something like 43, and then the last one bit her in the back of the head. John DeBont, who this is his first Hollywood film. This did come out in 1981. A lot of people say he had another film come out that year, so was this the first one or the other one? But the length of this shoot kind of shows me that this was definitely the first one. John DeBont had half of his scalp lifted by a lion. He was bit by a lion and had to have 220 stitches. Noel Marshall had so many bites, he actually ended up getting gangrene. It was an incredibly dangerous and crazy set, and having all these actors work alongside these giant cats, and it made the shoot last even longer because they weren't trained and they wanted their reactions to be real, so oftentimes they'd set up all these cameras and the cats wouldn't do anything, so they had to wait, and some days they wouldn't shoot anything. And a lot of times when you see that animals really attacking each other or humans, that is real, and it's kind of like beyond belief. And Tim Leake, who owns Alamo Drafthouse and is releasing this film, the Drafthouse, one of the things I really like about them is they re-release films that they've discovered and are bringing a new life to, like The Visitor. They did that with Miss 45. They also did it with Miami Connection, which I never saw, and this is their latest one. It was an independent production. It actually ended up costing about $17 million. Noel Marshall, it's his only directorial effort, and he was an executive producer on The Exorcist and doesn't have a ton of credits, but they had financing and then it fell out. I'm not exactly sure how they spent the money on this film, really. They had a lot of disasters in addition to all the onset injuries, and times they had to stop shooting because a cast member got bit by a lion and stuff. And this was an independent film, actually. No Hollywood studio made it, which is probably why it's kind of been so obscure for a while. It does have a different feel because the studio's not coming in and mandating they make kind of a studio movie. It has more of a documentary feel, but at the same time it's trying to do a couple of different things. This film was really made to show a love of animals and to help these animals out and to create a more awareness about these animals. It even says that at the beginning of the film, and even gives writing and directing credit to the animals who worked on this film. The thing about the directing credit that I find odd, did they really direct other animals? I understand giving an actor a writing credit if they improv. I'm kind of like okay with the writing, but the directing, I'm like, I mean, that's just too far. They didn't direct anything. I mean, you're just giving them credits. The vanity credits. They also bit you and stuff, so like, why? I don't know. Anyway, Anyway, it is weird because the whole reason they made this film was for that. They made this whole reserve. They got hundreds of large cats from circuses and people who bought them and couldn't take care of them, and zoos that were going to get rid of them. And I'm wondering if a lot of that money went to getting the cats. I'm not sure if that was part of the film's budget or like a different thing. I kind of think it was part of the film's budget. That kind of would make the most sense. It's trying to be kind of a family-friendly type of film, like a Swiss Family Robinson type of thing in the Disney vein of the 70s live action, 60s, 70s live action Disney stuff. So at first, like, Noel Marshall is playing this guy, Hank, who has moved to Africa. This film takes place in Africa. Is going to take care of all these animals, and he's kind of, him and his wife were supposedly having problems, and he left, and they're coming to visit him finally. Apparently communication's really bad there, and he like tries to pick them up, but they're not there, so he just like comes home and then goes away, and then they show up and go to his house, and there's all these lions and tigers and stuff. No bears though, I had to make that joke, of course, within the house, and it freaks them out, and they don't know how to act around these large cats, and they're suddenly kind of being terrorized by them while he's off trying to fight off these poachers from killing these large cats who live on his land in safety. But then it becomes a family-friendly movie, and they're all friends with the cats again, which is completely bizarre. I completely agree with Tim League that this deserves to be on the what the fuck shelf of this video store he goes to. Apparently there is one. Every film goer should have their movies that they're like, I can't, what the fuck is with this movie? Like, I can't believe this movie exists. You don't see a lot of odd experimental kind of family films that mess with the format and try to do a bunch of things and have the dad, played by Noel Marshall, Hank, seem really irresponsible. He's just like this crazy hippie. It feels like kind of a Mad Hatter. He just feels like completely off. He reminds me of Grizzly Man a lot. Yeah, he's getting slashed in the fucking face. He feels like somebody who would get bit by a giant lion. I guess that did happen a lot, so it's not inaccurate. Their kids star in it: Melanie Griffith, Jerry Marshall, and Noel Marshall. I'm not sure why, but Tippi Hedren and Noel Marshall have actual names like their characters and stuff, but for whatever reason their kids have their regular names, which is a little odd. But those scenes, it's really scary, and you're like, holy shit, these animals are terrifying. And then I thought about like, well, wasn't this film about like the love of these animals and how wonderful they are, and now you're doing like a Jaws thing with this? It's really contradicting itself, and it's doing that thing. Like, there's a real complaint about especially Jaws, that basically what it does is in the 70s you'd have all these horror films that are like pro-environmentalism, and we're showing how we're destroying the environment and the evils that we're doing. And then Jaws came along, and it was like the environment is attacking us, and it's like almost like the environment is evil, the environmentalism being the villain. And Roar seems to like both be early 70s and post Jaws 70s at the same time. Very much the definition of seeing a narrative have its cake and eat it too. It's like, no, we're pro these animals, see how majestic they are, see how wonderful they are, but we're also gonna freak you the fuck out from being around these animals and how you're seeing some of these attacks during the movie, and it's scary as shit. That part of it, it just does not make any sense. And the fact that they spent so much money, they spent like 4 years making it. It took 11 years from them coming up with the idea to its release. The whole time you're watching it, like, how does this exist? Like, John DeBont was really committed to this after he got his skull ripped off. He still came back and came up with all these cool ways to shoot it. Like, he had 5 cameras going at once. Obviously, when you have 2 cameras running at the same time, you can't have them see each other. So 5, I can't even imagine. It's hard enough that I have 2, even though I'm shooting this with 1. And I've done it before with 3 or 4, and it's very hard. So each camera doesn't see itself is very difficult. And then, you know, not having the giant cats do anything is probably like incredibly frustrating. The documentary style idea kind of works for it. It gives it kind of a odd 70s look, but there's certain times while you're watching the film that I know certain shots were done throughout several years, but it kind of looks it like the film stock looks older than other shots. I know the Draft House is restoring it. It's supposed to look really good, but I like when 70s movies look shitty, so I kind of didn't want to do that. And I think it kind of played into this film a lot, but the editing in some parts felt really cut up. Like, it really felt like they had way too much footage and had to kind of like edit their way out of it, like they were drowning in footage. I don't know how true that is, but it just felt that way. The cutting was really terrible, especially at the beginning. It really kind of came together when the family shows up. The film had more of a cohesive nature to its editing. The opening scenes, it really felt like I'm watching things from like 1 year and then another year and then this year. They had so many more problems on set. They had a flood that actually ended up drowning a lot lot of the cats, took away sets also, and then there was a brush fire, and then if any of the cats got out, the police would shoot them. It was a horrific nightmare of a film production, and apparently there is a making of DVD, but you have to go to the Roar website because it's independently made by the family, and it's one of Noel Marshall's sons. I think John Marshall or Jerry Marshall runs the site. I kind of almost want to buy the making of Roar just to see it, because it sounds like a great idea for a documentary, hearing about the making of this film. I probably spent more of this video talking about the making of this film. Everyone who's talking about this film was more talking about the making of this film. I would either like to see that documentary or someone to make a documentary about it. I find that so fucking fascinating. Tippi Hedren wrote a book about the making of Roar, which apparently is a good read. I haven't read it. It's like Apocalypse Now, where you just want to talk about all the various stories and myths you've heard from it. And Roar has enough real life stories that I don't think it even needs a myth, but it is a really kind of odd kids film, and I kind of like odd kids family films because that's really a genre not known for oddity. It's really known for having the responsible husband and having the responsible mom and things like that. And this film just doesn't have that, but also having a consistent tone that's really usually boring. And this film plays around a lot more and doesn't make a lot of sense thematically, certainly. But, you know, you'd have to think that the whole reason Drafthouse is releasing this and the whole appeal of this movie is like, what the fuck is this? Like, oh my God, I can't believe this exists. And Roar succeeds in that. I saw it by myself, which I think is not the greatest way to see it. See it with a friend, see it in the theaters. It's going to have a small theatrical run. It's just an experience of a movie and an experience to just tell people about. It's a fun cinephile thing to talk about the making of Roar and how the fuck did this happen in this ridiculous independent production that they tried to sell to studios and they wanted nothing to do with. It didn't even come out in America. The DVDs, I think, were only sold through the website. It got a VHS release in America, supposedly. It was a huge financial disaster. It's considered one of the biggest bombs because it only made about 3 million worldwide. This is a very odd film, and the reason Drafthouse is releasing it makes perfect sense. And it falls in line with that, but it's fun to have these kind of movies, just like Tim League said. It's like, what the fuck? What the fuck? How did this happen? How is this a movie? This is such a bizarre story. And it's all wrapped up even with the movie itself. If you're looking at it under that guise, it works absolutely perfectly within that. So if you have seen Roar and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.